Welcome to Thrive Deeper, an ongoing conversation with Dr. Matthew Jacoby, author of the Thrive Bible Reading Guides, teaching pastor, and leader of the Psalmist band Sons of Korah. Join us as we go deeper into the Bible, discussing the passages as we read them together with Thrive. Now here's your host, DJ Payne.
G'day and welcome to episode 32 of Thrive Deeper. It is I, your humble host, DJ Payne, and I'm excited to bring you this conversation between myself and my good friend Matthew Jacoby as we fly through the last half of the book of Nehemiah. Now we're going to encounter some amazing highs, some amazing lows, and everything in between as we look at this amazing historical document. This is pretty much taking us to the end of the Old Testament history that we have, to about 430 years before Christ. So break open your Bible, get it open to about chapter 5, chapter 6 of Nehemiah, and follow along as we get into this amazing book. I'll see you on the other end for Thrive Deeper. Beginning of 2019, Matt, and I am such a nerd. Tell me if you do this type of thing.
Yeah.
I guarantee you don't.
Yeah.
I go through and change all of my passwords at the beginning of the year. Every year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I change all of my passwords to everything.
Oh, that's very efficient of you.
Well, it's it's an exercise for my brain because then I have to re-log into everything. And if
it's way too much work. I'd rather be breached completely than have to do that. Like, you can have everything, just don't make me do that.
Call me in the light of what we're reading, call me diligent Nehemiah, who's making sure everything is secure and you can live with your broken down walls there. All right, now we're getting into, in this episode, we want to finish off the book of Nehemiah. We want to finish off the last half there. We've taken our time looking through and really extolling this amazing man of God at this, the last recorded history in the story of the Jewish people in the Old Testament of the Bible is under Nehemiah.
Yeah.
He's the character that's going to finish us off. So as we read through, we've just seen different opposition to the wall. He's been dealing with the people inside. Yeah. He's been making different promises. And now we get into chapter 6. Yeah. And yet again, here are those stooges from around the land to come in and make accusations against him.
Yeah, the problem is that Nehemiah for them is really problematic. I mean, Nehemiah for these guys, for Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, is the absolute. He is their nemesis because previous to that, they were having quite good relations with the Jews.
Yep.
And, they were doing trade, they were intermarrying to secure family alliances.
The Jewish people were slowly assimilating into the land.
They were slowly assimilating into the land, and that was to their advantage.
Yep.
Like massively to the advantage of Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, okay? So, And it was underway to the point where they have people in the city that there are already some of these alliances. So along comes Nehemiah, and he completely reverses this, and this is quite damaging for them. So they're pretty much wanting to do whatever they can. First of all, they're trying to stop the building of the walls, right? They don't. I mean, they think if we can do that, then Nehemiah's failed in the first place, right? But now they've failed to do that, and Nehemiah has this harsh sort of anti-non-Jewish policy.
Yeah.
And so they think, well, we're going to get rid of Nehemiah. And so they, they invite him to come out to a certain place to meet with them. How they thought he was going to buy this, I don't know. Come, let us meet together in one of the villages, right? Yes. Some village somewhere. And of course,
it's like,
he says, but they were scheming to harm me. I mean, it wouldn't have taken any brilliance for him to recognize that. Because they're thinking we've got to get rid of Nehemiah. Nehemiah's the problem. If we can get rid of Nehemiah,
and they're pretty much right there. They do it 4 times. Yeah. It's like, go away.
Yeah, that's right.
And then the 5th time, finally, they say, right, here's our plan. They reveal their hand.
Yeah.
And Sanballat's servant comes and says, here's the accusations. And it's one of those classic political machinations where you're damned if you do or you're damned if you don't.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. So you're like you're building the walls and you're going to proclaim yourself to be king, and we're going to let the king know this, and this is risky. I mean, this is a real risk because the Persian king. Again, Nehemiah is a eunuch, so how realistic that could have been is a question over this. But this is a threat. But again, he says in verse 9, "But I prayed, now strengthen my hands." So you see this at regular points when these threats come. Nehemiah does all due diligence, but at the end of the day, we see a man of prayer here, and he's praying the whole way. So he's not going to, right? He calls their bluff. He doesn't. The attempt to assassinate him isn't going to work. The letter doesn't work. Okay, now they come up with a plan. This is actually this is a pretty good plan. So the plan is, let's get a prophet, because they've got connections there. Let's get a prophet to falsely prophesy to Nehemiah that he should. Hey, your life is in threat. Take refuge in the temple, right? And then you'll be safe. Now, this is a cunning plan because, first of all, as a layman, Nehemiah wasn't allowed to enter the temple.
Yep.
Now, not only was he a layman, but he was a eunuch, right? And
there was laws around
most
that.
probably he was a eunuch.
Yep.
And was therefore excluded from any religious participation in the temple. So Leviticus 21, for example, says, "Say to Aaron, for the generations to come, none of your descendants who has a defect may come near to offer food to his God. No man who has any defect may come near." So lame, blind, disfigured, deformed, crippled, hunchback, dwarf goes down, or damaged testicles.
Yes.
Which is
castrated
eunuch.
Yep,
okay, so... now, there are reasons, that there are symbolic reasons for this in Leviticus, and we're not going to talk about that now. Point is, good plan, Nehemiah comes in the temple. Oh, hey, Nehemiah just broke the law. We gotcha.
Yep.
Which would completely discredit him as a leader of the Jews. Yep. So this is okay, we can't get rid of Nehemiah, so let's discredit him, and this is the way that they're going to do that. But again, Nehemiah in verse 12, so I realized that God had not sent him, but that he had prophesied against me, and that had been hid. So,
and then we see at the end, verse 14 as well, there was a female prophet, Noadiah, who was also prophesying. That was on the books as well. So we've got multiple people out there.
Yeah, that's right. So part of the reason why he, as a knee-jerk reaction, he doesn't do this, in verse 11, he says, "Should a man like me run away?" Because he's just prayed, "God, protect me," right?
Yeah.
So, and it's not that we shouldn't, do what we can.
Due diligence.
Due diligence. But he's not biting this tree. He's not just going to knee-jerk reaction, "I'll quickly run away." And then he somehow, we don't know how, comes to realize that God hadn't, that this wasn't from God anyway, and that this prophet had been hid. So, cunning plan. And again, he at the end he has this prayer: "Remember Tobiah, Sanballat, my God, because of what they have done." And he mentions the other attempts to deceive him. So this is where it says, so the wall was completed in 52 days. In a little over 7 weeks, Nehemiah he has overcome internal despair, external opposition to raise not just a physical wall, but also the self-respect of these people in the eyes of of themselves, but the surrounding nations as well. It is an incredible feat of leadership.
And then we finish off the chapter 6 there. Yeah. The wall is complete, as you said. And then that little paragraph at the end, the little footnote at the end, he said, "Listen, let me just make a note here about Tobiah, this Tobiah character." Yeah. And he goes and outlays, and again, this is why I love, and I mentioned on the last episode, it's about the people, and it's about him establishing the people, because he talks about the machinations. He's married to this person, and they've got relations into the Jews, and there's back and forth, and this person has caused me no end of drama because he's got this hook into the Jewish people.
I know. And this it underscores the problem that Ezra was dealing with in the first place. And because I know it was, when we talked about Ezra's separating these couples, and we talked about how harsh that seemed, but it's a little bit like, the conquest of Canaan and the harshness of the conquest. But it's all vindicated when you get to the book of Judges. Like, okay, because God said, if these people remain here, they will be a snare to you, right? They will be a snare, a thorn in your side. And then the book of Judges vindicates that.
And we don't want to get
same thing happens here.
Exactly. And we don't want to get political about it. It's really troubling, and it's always a mistake to try to take this God-given history and sort of overlay it with our current political machinations and stuff like that. But if you imagine that you're at war with another nation, and then the leaders of that other nation have got people, and we see this around the world with different political things. Yeah. People are married, and this person is in cahoots with this government. Yeah. It's pretty much the same thing. Yeah. They're at war with these other people, and these other leaders have got people on the inside of their government.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's like, this is what's causing me dramas. All right, moving into chapter 7, the walls are finished. Nehemiah registers all the people. Yeah.
Now, what needs to happen now to make this city viable is that the city needs to be repopulated.
Yeah.
Two things actually need to happen because they're still vulnerable to attack.
Yes.
Okay. So, there are not many people now because of this. He keeps the gates of Jerusalem. He says the gates of Jerusalem are not to be open until the sun is hot. The language is a little difficult here.
Yeah, and it's in some translation it'll be like during the hottest part of the day, close of the gates. In other translations, it's like
probably, he's probably trying to. So, for example, it could be keep them closed when everyone's having their midday siesta.
Exactly.
Because we just don't have the manpower here. So the gates are actually staying closed a lot longer than they normally would. But then the other thing that he needs to do then is populate the city.
Yes.
Now a lot of because the city's in ruins, so it's not a desirable bit of real estate. Yeah. And everyone had moved out to the countries because remember this is agrarian society, so the place to be is out in the country.
And I love the fact that he states like we finished the walls. Inside the city was spacious, lovely, houses all in ruins. We've got a walled city with nothing in it, type of thing.
That's right. And so people need to come in and repopulate, but also rebuild houses and live in there. So so the census really is of the population is to create a kind of way of equitably bringing people from each tribe and people so that each tribe could have or I should say each clan would have representatives that could volunteer to come and live in the city. That's the point. They're all living out in the countries. Well, we need to repopulate the city, and that's what happens.
So he brings him. He also sets up his brother and another godly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
A godly guy as the overseers of everything. Sort of
because he's going to be back and forth. Remember, he's not going to be able to stay. Yeah. Like he still works for the king.
Yeah, he's got to go back.
He's been given leave. And
I got to get back to work.
And he was made governor.
Yeah.
But he gets called back as well. So he puts leaders in place there.
So he then lists out, and then we read, I think it is in, let me have a look here, verse 66 there in chapter 7. He says, so a total of 42,360 people returned to Judah.
Yeah.
And in addition to the 7,000, servants, everything else, there's horses and other stuff, donkeys. And he sort of gives us a bit of the oversight of how it all.
Yeah, that's right. So that's all of the people who had returned.
Yeah.
And from there they're going to then take call on volunteers to come and live in the city.
Yeah.
To repopulate it.
And that's a small little city, even by today's standards.
Yeah.
If you go drive past a place and it's got 40,000 people in it, you're like, oh, that's a reasonable small little place. It's nothing special.
Yeah, although the 40,000 people are living all over.
Yes.
Yeah, that they're living all. So
they're spread out.
Yeah, they're spread out. So he's wanting to get people from these different places to come and live in Jerusalem. this then sets us up for chapter 8 and 9. Two of my favourite chapters.
These are great.
Yeah.
These are great. This is like, again, I liken everything to a movie.
Yeah.
I liken everything to a movie. This is a really dramatic moment in the movie when, forgive me for, even mentioning a Marvel film in the midst of talking about the Bible, but it's like in a Marvel movie that we see nowadays with comic book superheroes, and you might be having a comic book movie about, whoever, the Hulk or something, and then all of a sudden Thor turns up in the movie. And it's not his movie, but he turns up in this movie. Yeah. This is sort of like we're reading the story of Nehemiah, and then Ezra turns up.
That's right.
It's like from a different movie. Yeah. This is great. And it's a crossover time here, and it's an amazing
Well, it's
story.
interesting that Ezra has been so much in the background up to this point, because he comes quite prominently. Now he was obviously quite prominent and took a leading role. But when Nehemiah comes, I mean, he's the more the teacher, and he lets Nehemiah do the leadership sort of stuff, and then there comes this critical moment where the walls have been built, population, city's been populated, the census has been taken. Right, let's get together and remind ourselves what we're about. And so they get together, and you have this time where they read the law. This is 444 BC. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So they erect this pulpit thing for Ezra. He gets up, he reads the law. While he's reading the law, remember, the law is written in Hebrew.
Yes.
But at this stage, most of the people speak Aramaic, of course. You've got a lot of this generation have been brought up in Babylon. Not all of them have a continuing knowledge of Hebrew. Yes. In fact, Jesus would have spoken Aramaic. That would have been the language that the Jewish people, that they would have still read from the script, obviously read from the scriptures in Hebrew. They would have also probably there were Greek scriptures as well. Greek in the first century was the common language, but at this time, the Aramaic was the common language. Yes. So while he's reading from the law, you've got the Levites who are translating and probably explaining some sections as well. So it's read, translate, if you can imagine this situation. The people are listening to the reading of the law. It's probably the Deuteronomy, book of Deuteronomy, which is, if you can imagine, the book of Deuteronomy, there's lots of heart and they don't forget God and all the laws. And then they realize, we are, this isn't us.
Yeah.
And the people are weeping. I mean, this is like revival happens here. People are cut to the heart. And it's as, Paul says in Romans 20, no one will be declared righteous in God's sight by works of the law. Rather, through the law, we become conscious of our sin. And then Romans 5 verse 20 says the law was brought in so that the trespass might increase, but where sin increased, grace increased all the more. So, you see the law, exactly what Paul says, it has this effect. And the people are cut to the heart. We've fallen so far short of this. But you notice that that Nehemiah and Ezra and the Levites say, no, this like they said, this is don't mourn or weep. This is a day holy to the Lord your God. Like, let's get together and rejoice. And you think, isn't it a good thing that they're weeping and over their sins? Well, yes, it is, because it's the sign of the fact that they have recognized their failure. So that's a good thing. But it's not a good thing if we wallow in that, right?
If we stay there.
It never stops there.
Yeah.
So it's like the moment you realize that, don't just wallow in that sense of failure. At no point does God want us to wallow in that sense of failure. He wants to point us forward to the fact that he is gracious and forgiving, and that he's made a way for forgiveness in Christ. And, they had that. They had the temple, had the sacrifices, which reminded them that God is forgiving. And in fact, they had these festivals like Passover and the Feast of Booths, and that remind them of God's grace and mercy. So the response to the outbreak of weeping and penitence is, come on, let's rejoice together because God is gracious and forgiving.
And I love the fact that you hear, and it's also interesting that this passage here that we read, these couple of chapters, are in a third voice.
Yeah.
It's talking objectively, like this is a reporter on the scene almost,
right.
type of thing. Yeah. And we see, Ezra and the Levites doing their priestly duties, but then all of a sudden the voice of Nehemiah is in there as well.
Yeah.
And it shows you how godly that man is, that he had no qualms in stepping up with Ezra and the priests and saying, no, this is what God's telling us to do. Yeah. And it just shows you how unique and special his leadership is in this time there. So it finishes off in the chapter 8 here. Is it the next day? I think it's the next day is the Festival of Shelters, the Festival of Booths.
Yeah, that's right.
And
so they celebrate this festival, and that's part of them like reconnecting with God as this is a celebration of the Exodus, basically. Yeah. So, the Exodus is looked back to as this great act of redemption, God redeeming his people from slavery. And so it's in that context, it's a wonderful, it's like us celebrating communion, as a symbol of the fact that God has had mercy on us and forgives us, and through Christ. And it's this response. So to this outbreak of conviction of sin, it's a wonderful follow-up, of celebrating the grace of God. And it says that there was never, it was not celebrated like this from the days of Joshua and to that day. Probably, it was celebrated because even in Ezra's time it was they celebrated the Passover.
Yes.
But in this way, with the actual physical building. Well, and also the building of the booths.
Okay,
what I mean? It was but both. It was certainly the amount of joy, because really, they've experienced. This is a full blown revival that's happening here, and so in that sense, this is something new, something wonderful. Remember we talked about in the last episode Nehemiah's prayers. Yes. Right. Lord, remember me what I've done. It's like honor these efforts. Well, man, look at what happens here. It's like this is God turns up here, and there's this just this can only happen but for the Holy Spirit, and so there is this conviction and this revival that breaks out in this time. And this great celebration, and it's a true celebration. It's not just ticking the box.
No.
This is why it says that there was never one like it.
Yeah.
And they build these booths, and probably new in the sense, as I was going to say too, for the fact that they actually went through with building the booths and
yes,
which is still celebrated to this day, of course.
And so we move into chapter 9. We're sort of racing ahead here into chapter 9, and we go about 3 weeks after that moment. They're having this, in October, they're having this wonderful time of festivals. And at the end of October, the people assemble again. And again, we get part 2 of this, chapter 8 and 9, this amazing look at the heart of the people. Yeah. This is phenomenal.
Yeah. And there's this amazing prayer in that context. There is some scholarly discussion around whether this did historically fit in this context, or whether this is something that goes back to Ezra 10.
Oh, wow.
I think I think what's all important here is the way that it sits in the text, though. And in the text, it is kind of put here because I think the inspired editor wants us to see this as part of the same kind of revival that's going on here. And so you get this so I think the editor at least wants us to see it in the same that it's part of the same kind of thing. So there's this amazing prayer, again, very much like some of the prayers in the Psalms around like 106, 107, I think it is, the Psalm 105, 106, 107, where they go right through the history and it's like confess the whole history.
Wow.
It's really really significant, this, because it shows that they're thinking corporate. It's not just about our sins. We're confessing our sins and the sins of our fathers. So, forgive us, Lord, for we have sinned even as our fathers did. It's that kind of, as the psalm says, it's that kind of confession. It's like this is a wrap-up of everything beforehand.
Totally. And especially in this historical period of Nehemiah.
Yeah. This is like we are going to make this right.
Yeah.
We have gone wrong for so many hundreds of years, and now we're going to get this right. And it's just remarkable. And really, they are a different people from this time on. And, they make this agreement and they put their names to it, and there's a list of these names. And they make these oaths, right, to obey all of these laws, particularly the ones that they were convicted by. So if you go into
chapter 9,
we're in chapter 9. First one is mixed marriages. We promise not to give our daughters. Okay. Second one is the Sabbath. We're gonna keep the Sabbath. Next one is so these are the oaths that they're making. The next one is around the temple tax, or the tax is a bad word. It was a contribution for the temple, and then there's the priests, make these oaths to bring all of these offerings. So they're basically
renewing their
promising.
obedience.
They're renewing the covenant. This is covenant
Yes.
renewal going on here, and they're vowing to do these things in their and in a sense, it's this kind of covenant renewal is essentially what we do, and it's around this time. It's similar to what we do when we share the Lord's Supper. It's like a covenant reconfirming the covenant, reminding that we're in covenant with Christ, reminding us of his commitment to us, but also of our commitment.
Okay, just so we've got the bigger picture there. Sorry, Matt, I lost you there for a minute about what you were talking about. We've got in chapter 9, we have like a record of the speech, a record of the people's response.
That's right.
The heart of it. In chapter 10, we have like the signed promise, the document.
Yeah, that's right.
This is the document that was sealed. These are the promises that everybody made about all the things that you were just mentioning.
Yeah, that's right.
These are the priests that were there to witness it. These are the people that were there, and this is the promises that we have made.
Yeah, that's right.
To go forward.
Yeah,
that's the chapter 10 is that the response after all of the chapter 8 and 9 there.
Yeah, that's right. And then chapter 11 lists. These are the parts of the Bible that you could probably be excused for skimming over. But it's not unimportant. It talks about the new residents of Jerusalem. So remember, he wanted to repopulate the city. Well, he did, and there is a list of different people who are willing to do this. So this is significant, I think, because even though it's just a list of names, it's significant because the people are making a sacrifice to do this. These people are coming to live in the city for religious purposes. You know what I mean? So that Jerusalem can once again be this glorious city of God. Yeah. So it's like purpose over preference. It's let's make sure that we're being the people that we need to be, and so you get these volunteers.
It's funny, you remind just to inject a bit of my usual guff into all of this great stuff. I remember once a preacher, going through a passage very similar to this Nehemiah with the names of it and everything like that, and again people are like, I'm not interested. And he said, look, one day you're going to get to heaven.
Yeah.
And this guy's going to come up to you and it's like, hey, I'm Amzi, son of da-da-da. What did you think in Nehemiah? Da-da-da. And then you're like, I never read that verse. And he's like, man, I was in the Bible. Didn't you read my passage in the Bible? Type of thing. And I'll never ever forget that.
Yeah.
Of going, these are people that one day we might very well be meeting, in heaven.
And it's important because it is about real people.
Yeah.
This is a historical document. These things really happen. Yeah. And these people really did this.
So we move into chapter 12. We're going to hurry it up here.
Yeah.
We're going to go into chapter 12. Again, more lists of all the priests, the people that are coming back.
But then we get to really the climax. This is the climax of the book of Nehemiah, which is the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem. And from 27 onwards is a detailed description of all of the singing and the dancing and of the party that they had. And the sort of worship celebration that they had to dedicate the wall. Now, you would think, end it there.
End of the book.
That's right. Finish it there.
The end. Film brought to you in Technicolor.
Yeah.
Like, hooray.
Yeah, that would be the ideal.
Everybody dances into the sunset, and we have it, rainbow sets as the camera zooms out on the beautiful new city of Jerusalem. The music is playing, and away we go.
That's right. And this is like, it's like the credits are rolling, and then you get one of those...
Needle scratch.
Yeah. Then you get one of these
post-credit scenes.
We're coming back. Oh, no, actually, the ending wasn't as happy as all of that.
Wow.
It's like, why would you do that?
And this is
because it's such a perfectly structured book up to chapter 12. Like, can we just cut 13 off the end? Well, no, we can't actually, because this is the anticlimax. So I'll just explain. I should explain in chapter 13 says that still these connections, with Tobiah are there. And Nehemiah has to go back to the king. In the meantime, Tobiah moves in to the temple. He moves into the... So it's like, Nehemiah's gone. And again, because of financial pressure... Like, it's easy to too quickly sort of condemn them for this, or to look down on them, I should say, for this. But I think the best of us would have succumbed to
under the pressure. Again, because we've got the supervisor. A priest, Elishab, is he Eliashab? However you pronounce his name.
Who opens up a room in the temple.
Who's also a relative, somehow married into, or some sort of relative to Tobiah, this antagonistic character.
That's right.
And he says, listen, we're not really doing anything with this storeroom. Let me just move.
This is his office. This is his office, all right? So this is Tobiah gets an office in the temple to administer. So it means more than him just giving a room. It means that we're trading, we're doing business with these people. We're allied again with these people.
Politically, socially, everything except for morally or religiously, it makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect sense.
It's the center of these people's world.
Yeah.
I'll set my office up in there. I can deal with everybody as they're coming and going to the temple. Well, it makes great sense.
That's right.
I'll just have to move some of these sacred artifacts into this other room over here, and we're all good to go.
That's right. And so, financial pressure causes that. Financial pressure, as is often the case, it's like when we take things into our own hands, it's because we've got to provide for ourselves and like you sort of get that. But this is where the challenge is of this chapter. It's like these various financial pressures, economic pressure, causes them to lose the plot.
Yeah.
They lose the plan. The portions assigned to the Levites hadn't been given, right?
Yes.
So the maintenance of the temple falls by the wayside. Nehemiah comes back and he's absolutely furious.
Yeah. Again, the short fuse. This is where we see the short fuse in full display, especially in light of the fact that this is after everything that has been done.
Yeah, so they're not keeping the Sabbath. Again, they're still working through again. We've got to keep working to keep providing for ourselves. Then there was intermarriage. Again, can you believe it? They've started intermarrying. And so you've got these kids that some are speaking this language. This could have been maybe reconnecting from Ezra's time, maybe so that these women have come back. I mean, you can kind of understand that. But you've got these children that are speaking, the languages of the nations around them.
So there's multiple things being done.
Yeah.
After, the wall is complete, like, the actual physical building done, Ezra's great speech, the festival, all of this great stuff has been done. People committed themselves. And yet when Nehemiah comes back in this the epilogue of the story, it's a list of, we saw that, these people are mingling with these people.
Yeah.
Tobiah's living in the temple now.
Yeah.
These people are marrying in.
Yeah.
The Sabbath isn't being obeyed. People are setting up shops around the wall that we spent so hard to do.
Yeah.
This, like, he just list after list after list. Nehemiah loses his cool.
That's right. Because all of this, he thinks in this, if in that space of time you've done these things, but within a generation we'll be gone as a people.
Yep.
Like, gone as a people. Yep. And remember that the purpose of God is the people of God. So all of this is finished. So this is a big deal that this is happening. And so he comes back, he's absolutely furious. This is when he beats them up and pulls out their beards.
Verse 25, he's talking to the people who have got children intermarried, and he says, so I confronted them, I called down curses on them.
Yeah.
I beat some of them and pulled out their hair. I made them swear in the name of God that they would not let their children intermarry with pagan people in the land.
Yeah. Any more interesting thing about this is that he doesn't do what Ezra did previously.
No. Doesn't make them divorce.
Yeah, he doesn't make them. Now, remember that solution Ezra's time sort of came from the people, and Ezra's like, oh, okay. Like, what else are we going to do? Yeah. Like, this is really a threat, and it was so widespread by this time. This probably wasn't as widespread at this point.
Yes.
So he
might even be dealing with he might be dealing with a particular class of people within the thing. And I love we see, this is it. I love we see what a man of God's mind and heart is at in verse 26 after he has this furious outburst, and you can imagine people bloodied around him and lying there, and he goes into where his heart is at, and he goes, this is what led King Solomon to sin.
Yeah.
This is why I'm going crazy. We've read it all before.
Yeah.
Haven't you learned anything?
Yeah, that's right.
From it, and he goes into it.
So this is the anticlimax of the book of Nehemiah, but it's, this isn't Hollywood. And this is the Bible, and this is the way that it works. It's like, this is still anticipating something. We're not there yet, and they weren't there yet. That's the point. That they are a people still in need of what Ezekiel prophesied in Ezekiel chapter 36. The sprinkling with water for their sins and the new heart. I will give you a new heart, and I will move you to follow my decrees and my laws, Ezekiel 36, 25, 26. This had all been prophesied, but it hadn't happened yet. This is the point. The new covenant that had been prophesied by Jeremiah and Ezekiel, it hasn't happened yet. Yeah. And so this is actually anticipating that. It's still showing the need for this. And this, I think, is the last bit of history that we have.
And we're talking, this is what, about 430 something years before Christ now?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Because we saw that great celebration was 444.
Yeah.
Nehemiah went back, and about a decade later, this is a decade later, he's come back and seen what's going on. And again, sometimes we read through it and we think it's like the next week or a month later. No, this is 10 years later.
Yeah. It took 3 months even. No, it took 4 or 5 months even to get back.
Yes, exactly.
So he didn't do that every year.
These are long treks that he's doing. Yeah. And that's where we leave in about 430 something, BC, before Christ. Yeah. We leave this almost. I read the last verses here from Nehemiah like he's a broken man.
You want to talk about the last words of Nehemiah. Remember me with favor, my God. Now this is a prayer, right? And remember, it's not just a prayer like of just reward me for what I've done, but remember what I've done. Like. This is a prayer to the future. Let this not be wasted. Mm. And as I said, I mean, they hold on. They hold on to their distinctness against all odds, right into the and by against all odds, I mean, by 170 BC, they're going to have to. Many are going to lose their lives to stand up for their faith, and so it's quite remarkable actually what they endure to hold on to the distinctness of their faith. This is Nehemiah's legacy. The fact that there is still a Jewish people there in Judea in the first century from whom a Messiah can come is a large degree Nehemiah's legacy of the things that God did through Nehemiah. This is a remarkable thing about this book, and here as we have this short prayer, remember me with favour, God. It's a short prayer, but God answers in a big, big way. And God, I think a lesson that I would want us to take away from this is that whatever we do for God's kingdom, nothing will ever be wasted. However inconsequential you think what you're doing, however you think, oh, gee, that didn't end up very well. You know, I've done all of this work and it just doesn't seem to be, I've sown these seeds and that this, Nehemiah could have thought that. Yet we need to know that when we plant living seeds, God will be faithful to that and there will be a harvest. And this to me is such an encouragement from the book of Nehemiah so that you and I and all of us can know that whatever we do for God's kingdom is never ever in vain.
Like I told you, we had some massive highs and some massive lows. What a way to finish the book of Nehemiah. The same for the book of Ezra. We get these highs and we get these lows, these great declarations and then these great disappointments. Well, this is like the history lesson finished for this period, but next week it's exciting. We get to see what God is doing through the prophets with his people during this time of Ezra and Nehemiah as we finish off this Old Testament historical period. There is a lot of great stuff and we would love to have your questions. You can send us your questions through our website, thrivetoday.net.au. That's thrivetoday.net.au. Until next week, this has been DJ Payne for the team. We'll see you then.
Thank you so much for listening to Thrive Deeper. We value all our listening community. If you are on Facebook, search and like Thrive Today page to get all of our latest updates. Our home on the internet is at thrivetoday.net.au. There you can subscribe to the Thrive Daily Reading Guide and contact us directly. That's at thrivetoday.net.au. Until next time, thrive.